I've spent the last year riding in the Klim Latitude for thousands of miles in all weathers, from the backlanes and the motorways of the UK to the Atlas Mountains and even the edge of the Sahara. It's been through just about everything a touring suit can face. So after a full year, how has it held up? Is it worth the money, or is it not quite the do-it-all touring suit that Klim claim? Klim described this as a touring piece built for use on tarmac, not an off-road hardcore adventure suit. It sits just below the premium Kodiak in their lineup, offering similar protection but in a slightly lighter weight and more flexible package. It's obviously a bit more road orientated, but for me it seemed like the ideal suit for year-round use here in the UK. Before we move into the meat of the video, I just want to add a little bit of transparency. Obviously you would have noticed that Klim are a channel partner, but this is not a paid piece. Klim don't get to review or approve the script or the video before it goes live. This is purely my opinion on this suit, having worn it over thousands of miles over this last year, and that honesty and transparency is something that happens through any of my video reviews, and I just want to make that perfectly clear before we move on. Right, let's get into it. The Latitude uses a 2-layer Gore-Tex shell, so it's lighter and less bulky than the 3-layer Pro shell that you'll find in the Kodiak that I mentioned earlier. On the bike, that translates to a jacket that feels more supple and is easier to wear all day, but it's still robust. Stretch panels under the arms make movement easy, but on the flip side, that means it only gets a CE single A rating. But just looking at the ratings on their own doesn't tell the whole story. Now, I'm not suggesting that we ignore those ratings at all, far from it, but it is only part of the story. There is an element of nuance to it. So when we take a look at what this single A rating is and how that comes about, we need to look at this chart. The reason this is rated A is, as I mentioned, because of those stretch panels under the arm. They sit in zone 2, and being stretch means that they don't have the abrasion resistance required to meet AA standard. But it is only that section. The rest of the zone 2 features materials that would put it in AA territory. Now, I'm not just making some convenient excuses for the purpose of this video. There is nuance in how these ratings are put together and exactly what goes into a garment to meet those ratings. Personally, I still think this is a pretty robust jacket. Yes, you've got the stretch panels on the inside which affect that rating, but everything else about the jacket feels strong, and it's certainly a jacket I'd be happier to take a slide in than something like the Merlin Chigwell Light, which I've owned. That's a mess jacket, much more lightweight, much more flimsy than this, but that happens to have a AA rating. There are 600D Cordura overlays on the shoulders, goat leather on the elbows, and D30 level 1 armour throughout. Despite its sturdy construction, this is, I think, a surprisingly light jacket to wear, which is exactly what you want for touring kit where you're going to be spending long or multiple days in the saddle. So let's talk a little bit about sizing, and Klim always lean more towards an American cut, so they are slightly generous. To give an example, I'm normally a XL in most motorcycle jackets, with the exception of Belstaff, which is probably more of a fashion cut now, and Revit, funnily enough, where I have to go to a 2XL to get the comfort that I want. For this, I went down a size. This is a large, and I've still got room inside this to be able to layer up. And it's the same for the trousers. I'm normally a 36-inch waist. In these, I went to a 34, and they're fine. So my advice is, if you're looking at the Klim stuff, I would always, as a starting point, go at least one size lower than usual. But as with any of this stuff, you really need to get somewhere and try it on just to make sure. Being a touring jacket, it does have a slightly longer cut, but it still works quite nicely on adventure bikes and most touring bikes, certainly the upright ones with minimal bunching, and that's helped because you've got a little zipped gusset adjuster on the side, and you've also got these straps so you can pull it in around the stomach area here if you need to, but still have that little bit of flex in the bottom when it comes to sitting on the bike. Over the last year, I've worn this in pretty much every kind of condition you can expect, from torrential rain in the UK to drizzly alpine roads, all the way through to the searing heat of the Moroccan desert. In the wet, waterproofing has proved to be first class. I've ridden in hours of rain and nothing's come through the shell or the pockets. The only weak point in terms of that, I think, is this relatively short collar, because in torrential rain, if the rain's coming down sideways, it does tend to creep up over the top. You can cinch it in. There's a little pull cord on the back for you to be able to pull it in tight, but it is a relatively short collar, so that is something to be aware of. However, having said that, that's easily fixed with the use of a storm collar. And to be honest, I'd rather have this short collar for overall comfort rather than having a tall, stiffer, more restrictive collar like something you'd find on rucker jackets. In the heat, it is a little bit of a mixed bag. Now, because it is a 2-layer Gore-Tex, it is that little bit lighter than some of Klim's heavier weight 3-layer jackets. Ventilation is pretty solid. You've got 2 large chest vents and rear exhausts, and the cuff zips that can double as arm vents. Up to the mid-20s, as this is with a base layer underneath, it's perfectly comfortable. At 30 degrees, despite this direct venting, you do have to remember that this is still a Gore-Tex laminated jacket. In Morocco's desert heat, it coped as well as anything like this could, but once it hit the 33 degrees C mark, I found it pretty uncomfortable. Like most Klim jackets, this is just a shell with only a lightweight comfort liner inside. But to be honest, I quite like that approach. Klim allow you to choose your layering to suit what you need. In late spring and early autumn, a base layer is usually enough. Once we get below 14 or 15 degrees C, I'll add Klim's override alloy mid layer with its lightly quilted thin insulation on the chest and the arms. And then when temperatures drop to low single figures, the Maverick down jacket keeps me toasty without adding bulk. In the summer, I just strip it back to a thin base layer and open every vent I can. That flexibility for me makes it an ideal suit to wear all year round, particularly in the UK and in some other milder climates. You get a sensible number of pockets, 2 hand warmers, 2 chest pockets that double as vents, all of which, apart from the internal ones, feature waterproof zips. Adjustments are simple: double straps on the arms and waist and draw cords at the hem. The trousers mirror that setup with waist adjusters and big thigh vents. Not everything is perfect though. I think these cuffs need a little bit of a rethink. They are easy to zip and get over pretty much any glove, but with no gaiter, wind can creep up if you run short gloves, and the adjustment tends to ruche up the cuff rather than snug it tight. The calf strap on the trousers, if done up a little bit too tight, can dig in on longer rides, and that left leg pocket isn't the easiest to access, if I'm being honest. Small annoyances, but worth mentioning. In terms of durability, after thousands of miles, it's held up brilliantly. No broken zips, no frayed seams, no leaks, and the fabric still looks good and it hasn't lost any of its structure. That's one thing I've found over the years, is that Klim stuff is built to last. Yes, you may pay a premium for it, but it is gonna last you a long time no matter what you put it through. A good example of that is the drifter jacket, which sadly is now discontinued, but I've been riding in one of those since 2018. You've seen it on the channel quite a lot. I've done thousands and thousands of miles in that, and it's still going strong. I've never had an issue with it, and it still appears in videos to this day, and it's still a jacket that I grab when I need that kind of style. With a retail price of £830 for the jacket and £680 for the trousers, it's not cheap, but you are buying a premium piece of kit. So determining value becomes quite tricky, because quite obviously there will be large amounts of people that will balk at those prices and would never consider paying anything like that for their motorcycling gear. On the flip side, there are other people who will look at that and say, well, actually that's not bad value considering the performance of the jacket, its longevity and its strength. So from my point of view, I think it ticks a lot of boxes. Yes, it is on the expensive side, but I believe from experience that Klim stuff lasts really well. But only you can be the judge of whether that works for you, and I'll let you debate that down in the comments. I found it to be comfortable, it kept me dry, it's adaptable, and it's genuinely capable of year-round use. It's not perfect, and in my view the cuffs and the calf straps could use some refinement, and it can obviously get warm in serious heat, but overall the Latitude is one of those suits that just works in the majority of situations. And that's probably the best compliment I can pay it. I'm in the fortunate position of having access to plenty of kit to wear, but it's this jacket and pants that I have generally pulled out of the cupboard more often than not, particularly if I'm going to spend a lot of time on the bike, and particularly if I'm not entirely sure what that weather is going to be like. So there you go, that's my honest take, having spent a year in the Latitude. If the video has raised any questions or you want to share your own experience, then let me know in the comment section down below. I always enjoy reading and responding to your comments. And all that leaves me to say is, until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.